Before leaving home, Jack writes a letter to explain his plan. His sister Lily has been mentally ill since their mother died and tried to self-delete, but Jack saved her just in time. Jack wanted her to be released to home care under the family doctor. However, she became a ward of the state and has been sent to an asylum, where no visitors are allowed. Desperate to help her, Jack decides to pretend to be crazy, so he's sent to the asylum too, leaving the letter behind as insurance policy. He starts by getting some wounds, cutting his hair very badly, and breaking the mirror. Then he goes out shirtless in public and starts bumping into people while cursing and talking nonsense about monsters. Soon the police arrive and hold him down while the paramedics give him a sedative. Moments later, Jack is taken to the asylum and a guard named Charles carries him away on a stretcher to see Dr. Janetti. Jack feels dizzy because of the sedative, but still manages to say more nonsense to keep up his act. Janetti immediately decides Jack needs to stay in maximum security, and Charles takes him to a special corridor where tons of dangerous people are kept in cells. Charles ties Jack to his bed while explaining one of his neighbors is the infamous Mark, who killed a bunch of girls and kept their bodies to do the dirty. On his way out, Charles notices that Mark is vomiting blood and enters the cell to help. Mark reveals he has a blade and Jack sees it, so he shouts a warning. Charles manages to defend himself just in time and closes the cell again before leaving. Then Mark angrily yells at Jack for ruining his escape plan, causing all the other people in the cells to start screaming as well. Sometime later, Janetti checks on Jack and decides he's calm enough to be taken to the ward. After Charles takes Jack away, Janetti approaches Mark and mentions a treatment called Orpheum before gently touching his head to keep him passive. At the psych ward, a nurse named Nancy asks Jack to wait for a second while she finishes his paperwork. Once she's in another room, Jack begins looking at the other patients. He approaches a woman thinking it's Lily, but it's actually a patient named Heather, who is friendly and gives him a piece of paper. Suddenly, she starts screaming, accusing Jack of wanting to take advantage of her. Nancy immediately comes back and makes Heather shut up by threatening to take her upstairs. Afterward, Nancy shows Jack around while explaining the rules. At that moment, she's attacked by Loomis, who starts choking her and causes her to drop her panic button. This is picked up by Dave, who passes it to Jack so he can press the button. Soon Janetti comes in with just a few words. He makes Loomis let go of Nancy. Then Charles tases Loomis to take him upstairs while Janetti announces a lockdown. Nancy takes Jack to his room, and he pretends to go to sleep. As soon as she's gone, he checks on the window to see if it's possible to escape through it. Suddenly he hears a noise and opens the closet to find Dave, who explains he only wants to be sure Jack doesn't have crazy eyes. Jack realizes Mark had white eyes, and Dave confirms it's caused by the Orpheum treatment. On the ceiling, Jack can see a light glitching, and Dave explains Orpheum happens in a lab upstairs. Those who get treated there come back very different. At the lab, Janetti electrocutes Loomis until his mouth is foaming. The assistant Vera turns off the machine and scolds Janetti for taking it too far, but Janetti says he knows what he's doing and asks her to prepare Loomis for an additional dose of Orpheum. When Vera refuses, Janetti snaps and begins describing how Orpheum could help the patient's brains while injecting Loomis himself. This makes his eyes go white. The next day, Jack finally sees his sister on the garden, so he heads to the common room to wait for her. When he approaches her, Lily immediately scolds him for coming, saying she doesn't want to be saved because she's as sick as their mom. An argument ensues and Lily yells, so a nurse sends her back to her room. All this is seen by Heather, who looks intrigued. Later in the cafeteria, Jack takes a spoon and puts it in his pocket when nobody's looking. Suddenly Heather approaches him to ask about Lily. She also invites Jack to come to her room in the evening, but he turns her down and ignores her yelling. Jack sits with Dave, and soon they're joined by Charles, who reminds Dave of their deal. Dave is supposed to steal some medicine for him, or Charles will report him. After Charles leaves, Dave asks Jack to keep his secret, and in return he promises he won't tell anyone that Jack isn't actually crazy, which he figured out because Jack acts sane in private. That night, Charles gets in Heather's room and forces her to do the dirty with him. This happens regularly, and Charles keeps her quiet by pointing out nobody would believe her. Meanwhile, Jack tries to use the spoon to get parts from the bed. The next morning, he uses those parts to try opening the window, but he fails and hurts his finger in the process. Later during group therapy, Jack shares a story about his mother's sickness and how they operated on her brain multiple times. His hand keeps on bleeding, and soon Loomis falls to his knees and starts twitching while staring at the blood. The nurse tells him to return to his seat, but instead Loomis jumps on Jack while another patient with white eyes licks the blood on the floor. Chaos erupts as the guys fight, and the nurse takes out her panic button, but before she can press it, Loomis bites her hand to stop her. Charles arrives and tases Loomis to knock him out. Then the nurse sends everyone to their rooms as she announces another lockdown. Jack and Dave agree that Loomis wanted Jack's blood, which means Orpheum isn't just a treatment. Afterward, Jack requests a meeting with Janetti and asks him to get his letter from his apartment. They do find the letter, however the paper is empty except for a couple of words. Jack freaks out and accuses Janetti of playing a trick on him while swearing he isn't crazy, but Janetti just orders Charles to take Jack to maximum security. Jack yells and struggles all the way there to no avail. The other patients yell at him in return, and Mark reminds him he wants revenge. Many hours pass and Jack feels like he's going actually crazy. When Janity comes to check on him, Jack goes back to pretending he's insane and apologizes for his outburst earlier, so he's allowed to go back to the psychiatric ward. In the afternoon, Jack asks Dave to teach him to sneak around like he does to steal medicine because he wants to investigate Orpheum, but Dave refuses. That night, Jack gets out of his room and is startled by Dave. He's changed his mind and agrees to show Jack how to sneak around, but he won't go with him upstairs. The duo carefully moves through the facility while avoiding Charles, and Dave shows Jack how to get into an office, where Dave steals medicine while Jack checks the desk and steals a security card. At that moment Charles comes in, but the duo manages to hide just in time. Charles looks around and quickly leaves. Afterward, Jack uses the security card to open the door and go upstairs. Charles is distracted on the phone and isn't looking at the security cameras, so Jack easily keeps moving around without getting caught. Eventually, he makes it to the solitary ward and checks the window on every room, getting startled by the strong reactions from the crazy people. A few doors later, he finds Lily, who apologizes for yelling at him last time and begs for help because she's seen her neighbors under the effect of the experiments. Unfortunately, Jack hears Charles coming, so he has to run away. After running through a bunch of corridors, including the maximum security, Jack reaches Janetti's lab. He finds a cage and stumbles back in shock when he sees Loomis inside trying to attack him. Jack continues to look around and finds a bottle of Orpheum, which he steals together with a scalpel. Then he has to hide because he hears voices. Janetti comes in, followed by Vera, who points out Orpheum is multiplying in the patient's body. Janetti snaps and pushes her against the shelves, tying her up while explaining that Orpheum is more than medicine. He says it's actually nanotechnology and it's behaving the way he programmed it to. Vera points out Orpheum is mutating and could become contagious, but Janetti ignores her while getting an injection for himself. Next, he makes a cut on her leg with a scalpel, and her pain is so exciting that he starts doing the dirty by force while Loomis watches. When he's done, he orders Vera to find the mutation to control it. Then Vera gets her fingers wet with her blood and teases Loomis with it. The next day, Heather teases Jack because he looks like he didn't sleep. He ignores her and approaches Dave to show him the Orpheum bottle. When the nurse comes to remove his tag, he manages to hide the bottle in his fist just in time. Afterward, Jack brings Dave outside and asks him to steal Charles's keys so he can rescue Lily. They're interrupted by a patient with white eyes, who has found a cat. He shows the animal off before suddenly decapitating the poor creature to eat it. The duo panics and tries to run, only for the guy to grab Dave. Jack immediately pushes the man to save Dave and gets attacked instead. As the two men wrestle on the ground, the other patients take the cat's body to feed. Thankfully, Charles arrives and tastes the guy unconscious. That night, Jack has a nightmare full of creepy images like crazy people getting violent, his mom's death, Lily's self-deletion attempt, and weird mutated bodies. In the morning, Jack rushes to the common room and kicks a table as he demands to see Lily. The nurse tells him that she's upstairs with Jeanette, making him furious. Jack yells at her and notices her white eyes, but the nurse swears it's normal because it's just a side effect from Loomis' bite. She considers sending him upstairs, but Nancy takes him back to his room and locks the door. Meanwhile, Vera brings food to the patients in the maximum security, pushing it through a special hatch. Mark throws his plate on the ground, saying he prefers it when his food is alive. That night, someone enters Jack's room and he jumps on them, but it's just Dave who's managed to steal Charles's keys by putting sleeping medicine in his drink. As the duo makes their way upstairs, Lily is tied up in the lab and begs for mercy, while Vera tries to feed Loomis. He's asleep, so she tries poking him with a stick, which accidentally falls. When Vera tries to take it back, Loomis suddenly grabs her arm and breaks it to suck the blood. As Lily screams for help, Vera pulls back and loses her limb, so she ties her belt around the resulting stump to handle the bleeding. At that moment, Jeanette enters the lab and gets mad at Vera for putting the entire program at risk. Vera calls his attitude out, but he just says that she didn't care when she wasn't the victim. He ties her to a bed in another room to treat her and takes a sample from her arm while confirming the infection is spreading, which makes him happy. Then he goes looking for Charles and doesn't find him. However, he does see Jack and Dave on the security cameras. He tries contacting Charles, but he's sleeping in Heather's room and she hides the radio. Jack and Dave continue to sneak around and cross the maximum security hallway. Mark offers to team up with them, but Jack refuses. At that same time that the nurse comes to check on Vera, Jeanette snaps in anger and short-circuits the electricity, causing the doors of the maximum security area to open. All the dangerous patients come out, and Jack fights them off while Dave struggles with the door until he opens it. The duo gets into the other room and uses Charles's taser to short-circuiting the lock, causing a shock that pushes the patients back. Then they start running away, only for the dangerous patients to chase after them. Eventually they reach the lab, and it takes Jack several minutes to deal with the lock. The patients are about to catch them, but the duo opens the lab just in time and goes inside. pushing the door to lock it and crushing a patient's fingers in the process. Then Jack rushes to untie Lily, who confirms Jeanette hasn't injected her yet. Meanwhile, the nurse is taking care of Vera's wound. But at that moment, she finally loses it and starts feeding on it. Back to Jack's group, they leave the lab and now have to cross maximum security to reach the stairs. In the cells, there are lots of blood and bodies from the patients killed by those with white eyes. They open the door at the end of the corridor only to find it blocked, meaning it's a trap. The infected patients come out of the ceiling, so Jack tries to activate the elevator with the wires from the lock while Lily and Dave fight the patients with the tasers. They start bringing enemies down, and if anyone ends up bleeding, other patients end up feeding on their teammates. Suddenly Mark reaches Lily and starts dragging her away, but luckily Dave attacks Mark and saves her just in time. When Jack is finally done with the elevator, he joins the fight and almost gets killed by an enemy, only for Lily to defeat the guy by tossing him in the mouth. The trio rushes to get in the elevator and Mark goes after them, holding the door open. However, Jack stabs him in the chin with the scalpel, allowing the elevator to close. In a few minutes, the group makes it to the psychiatric ward and Jack breaks the elevator's pad so they can't be followed. They're shocked to find blood everywhere, so Jack asks Dave to protect Lily while he investigates. He follows a weird noise and opens a bedroom door to discover Heather eating a dead Charles. She immediately sees him and begins following him. Thus, Jack steps away and pushes other patients off before punching Heather and running away. As more patients follow him, Jack returns to Lily and Dave, and they block the door before leaving. In the reception, Nancy sees them and throws a chair through the glass in panic, but she calms down when she realizes the trio isn't infected. Eager to escape too, she guides the group to the kitchen to find an alternate exit and grabs some knives for self-defense. Suddenly, a patient jumps on Jack, but the guy gets easily overpowered and they kill him with a knife to his face. Soon more patients arrive, and a vicious fight ensues as blood is splattered all over the kitchen thanks to all the stabbing. A bunch of patients get killed as the heroes make their way through the kitchen and finally reach a back door, which they make sure to lock before going up the emergency stairs. Eventually, they find an office and try to look for a phone, only to find the infected nurse instead. She explains Jeanette is looking for a solution, so everyone should wait. The nurse also yells at Nancy for abandoning her station, but Nancy shuts her up by stabbing her. Next, Nancy remembers Jeanette has a gun, so the group runs to his office. Dave takes a sword from the wall, and Jack opens the desk drawer to find the gun together with his real letter. On their way out, they notice a blood track on the floor and follow it. At that moment, the nurse bursts through a door and attacks Nancy, only to get stabbed to death by Lily. Then they run through the recovery ward and find Vera, who tells them about a hidden passage in the lab and how to use the laundry chute to avoid the stairs. Before they leave, Vera asks for euthanization, so she doesn't become a cannibal too. Nancy gives her an injection and Vera dies. The group starts running again to avoid more incoming patients while looking for the laundry chute. Nancy opens a door and finds an infected cleaning lady who jumps on her and bites her neck. Jack rushes to shoot the woman down and checks on Nancy, who sadly is already dead. Meanwhile, Dave and Lily find the laundry chute, so they start climbing through it while Jack keeps firing at incoming patients. Heather also comes and Jack tries shooting her, only to discover he's out of bullets. Instead, he kicks her off before getting in the chute as well, causing Heather to follow him. After some struggle against her hands, Jack manages to stab her and make her fall. The trio continues to climb and comes out in maximum security, where the infected patients have eaten each other. Suddenly, Mark blocks their way and attacks Jack with the scalpel from before. The men barely get to fight before Lily kicks Mark off and stabs him first, killing him for good. Then the trio finally reaches the lab, finding Loomis is still in his cage. While Jack and Lily uncover the secret tunnel, Jeanette appears and grabs Dave, slowly sticking an ice pick in his eye to perform an improvised lobotomy. It doesn't kill him, but it destroys his brain. Next, Jeanette hits Jack with a lamp and tries attacking him with the ice pick, so the siblings fight together to overpower the doctor. Jack steals the ice pick when his leg gets stabbed and pushes Jeanette, stabbing him back before Lily tases him unconscious. When Jeanette wakes up, he's been tied to the cage so Loomis can feed on him. The siblings run away through the secret tunnel while hearing Jeanette's screams. The tunnel takes them to the roof, and as the siblings go down the stairs, Jack accidentally drops the Orpheum bottle, which breaks. In the morning, they're finally out and wandering through the road until they're found by the police. After hearing their story, the cops drive to the asylum and Jeanette opens the door looking just fine. Suddenly, a bunch of infected patients burst out and kill the cops on top of the car while the siblings helplessly watch. In the end, the patients run away into the wild to spread the infection, ignoring Jeanette's screams, saying he can help them. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.